Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little strange. No flaming chariots or titanic clashes, just some very confused cows, a divine temper tantrum, and a newborn baby god with serious kleptomaniac energy. You're standing on the edge of a dewy pasture somewhere near Pylos, and the sun's just crested the hills. It's Apollo's domain, orderly, golden, and radiant. Birds chirp on cue. The breeze even smells like citrus, but something is off. There's a faint, almost comedic emptiness in the field ahead. The grass is slightly flattened, hooves everywhere, but not a single cow in sight. You shield your eyes against the morning glare and mutter something you probably shouldn't say around Olympians. Because Apollo's herd, the sacred cattle he's only just been gifted by the gods, is gone. Completely. Vanished overnight. And if there's one thing Apollo hates more than dissonant liars, it's chaos in his routine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the grass where the cows should be, noting how meticulously the pasture's been ransacked. The prints don't make sense. Some are going backward, some sideways, and a few are just missing entirely. It's like the cows moonwalked out of Olympus. Up above, Apollo hovers somewhere between majestic fury and full-on divine meltdown. His golden bow's slung over his shoulder, but it's the clenched jaw and twitching eye that speak louder. He doesn't scream. No, Apollo's the type who gets real quiet when he's mad, which is significantly worse. Birds stop mid-tweet. Even the olive trees wilt slightly. You don't want to be around for this. Who would dare? He mutters, scanning the horizon like a heat-seeking missile. His hair literally glows. You try not to stare. Down below, the world's tiniest criminal mastermind is finishing breakfast. Baby Hermes, barely a day old, is munching on a honey cake in a cave tucked into Mount Silene. No one told him he couldn't walk yet, let alone steal. So he did both, because, well, boredom. This all began when he got bored of being a newborn. Some myths say he was already talking by sunset of his birthday. Others say he was composing poetry before his first diaper change. Historians still argue whether the Hermes myth evolved from older trickster deities or emerged as a parody of Apollo's self-importance. But either way, the little guy's up to something. And you're right there with him. You squeeze into the cave, trying not to disturb Maya.
Earlier that night, under a sky still tinged with stardust, Hermes snuck out. Picture this. A newborn, climbing out of a woven reed cradle, tying soft bark around his feet, and giggling quietly as he tiptoes away from home. The bark is key. It masks his footprints. Even more ridiculous, he strapped cow hooves to the bottom of his makeshift shoes, so that when someone followed the trail, it looked like a cow was walking on two legs. Backward. No, really, and it worked. You follow his trail now, or try to. It's like someone handed the cows a map and then shredded it for fun. Tracks veer in impossible angles, some fade into thin air. It's all maddeningly clever. Eventually, you reach the spot. Deep in a grove tucked behind overgrown laurels is a makeshift pen fashioned from grapevines and driftwood. There, lounging like he owns the place, is Hermes. He's strumming a tiny, stringed instrument, grinning like a cat that's just discovered jazz. This is the first lyre. Made from a tortoiseshell, gut strings, don't ask from what, and sheer arrogance. It's not quite in tune, but it sings with a strange charm. Hermes glances up at you, gives a one-dimple smirk, and continues playing. The cows blink, seemingly unbothered. One yawns. A bird lands on a cow's horn. It's all weirdly tranquil for an intertheistic crime scene. There's something endearing about Hermes, though. He's got that mix of chaos and charisma that would absolutely dominate a modern reality show. You get the sense that if you asked him why he did it, he'd shrug and say, because it was there. Fact, Apollo's sacred cattle weren't just livestock. In ancient Greek tradition, cattle symbolized wealth, status, and divine authority. Stealing them? That's not just a prank, it's a declaration. But Hermes doesn't do politics. He does vibes. And somewhere, not far off, Apollo has just connected the dots. You hear the air shimmer as he descends. There's an audible hum, like the sun itself is sighing in frustration. The grass crisps beneath his feet as he lands near the grove. Hermes doesn't stop playing. Apollo steps into the clearing. "Where," he says, voice low and terrifyingly calm, "are my cows?" Hermes doesn't flinch. He just plays a new melody. It's lilting, slightly jazzy, a bit smug. "I'm just a baby," he says innocently, eyes wide. "What do I know about cows?" You cover your face. And that's where you blink, wondering how you got here, wedged between a furious sun god and a baby in a diaper who's pretending he doesn't know what a cow is. Apollo towers, literally glowing with irritation, and Hermes, well, he yawns dramatically. Then he picks a string on his homemade lyre and mutters something about needing a nap after being falsely accused. You can practically hear the eye twitch behind Apollo's serene mask. He inhales deeply, maybe trying not to vaporize the infant on principle, and plants his golden staff into the earth. "You lied to my face," he says. Hermes blinks innocently. "Did I, though? I mean, can a baby lie?" You don't know whether to laugh or run. But here's the kicker. The crime scene is spotless. No hoofprints leading here, no witnesses, no divine camera system. All Apollo has is a vague suspicion, a trail that ends in nonsense, and a smug little brother who looks like he couldn't even hold up a cheese wheel. See, Hermes hadn't just stolen the cattle. He'd engineered the theft like a heist movie villain. He even had the foresight to lead the cows backward, literally walked them in reverse to confuse the tracks. Historians still argue whether this part of the myth reflects early shepherding trickery or symbolic commentary on inversion and subversion in divine order. Meanwhile, Hermes hums a tune. It sounds suspiciously like a cow-themed lullaby. If this were a mortal toddler, you'd expect a juice box and an award for best misuse of livestock. Apollo, not one to be toyed with, raises his voice, not to shout, but in that chillingly polite way that says, "I'm about 5 seconds from rearranging reality." "Where," he says again, "are my cattle?" Hermes raises his chubby little arms. "I don't know what cattle are. That's a very complicated word." Apollo's nostrils flare. The sunlight gets uncomfortably warmer. You shift, suddenly aware that you're standing between the personification of fire and a child who could sell ice to Hades. The absurdity of the situation doesn't make it less tense. Then, Hermes makes it worse. He burps. A satisfied, post-snack baby burp.
and Apollo loses it. But not in the way you expect. He doesn't burn the grove to ash, doesn't summon a solar storm, or curse Hermes into eternal timeout. No, he lifts Hermes, cradle and all, and flies straight to Mount Olympus. You clutch the edges of your imagination and follow them skyward. The wind rushes past, cold and swift.
Zeus eyes the baby. Hermes yawns again, waves.
Really? Zeus says. He's what, 2 days old?
1.
Technically,
Hermes pipes up helpfully.
Zeus blinks. He's used to divine chaos, but this is new. You perch somewhere behind a pillar, watching this family meeting unfold like a surreal courtroom drama. Zeus gestures for calm and asks for details. Apollo explains, emphasizing the reversed footprints, the strange disappearance, the suspicious lyre playing. Hermes says, "I didn't steal anything. I acquired a herd." And somehow that word lands differently. Acquired. Zeus chuckles. You see it. A flicker of recognition. A tiny spark of paternal pride. He knows a trickster when he sees one. There's an actual term in mythology for this moment, the divine reckoning of cleverness. It's the point where gods stop judging actions and start judging potential. Hermes isn't just a misbehaving infant. He's the beginning of something useful. Dangerous, yes, but very useful. Apollo is still fuming. You can't just let this go. I'm not letting it go, Zeus replies smoothly. I'm negotiating a settlement. And just like that, you realize you're in the middle of the first ever celestial arbitration. It's a custody battle, but for cows. Zeus orders the cattle returned. Hermes pouts. What if I trade them for this? He strums the lyre again, and this time it really sings. The melody floats through the marble hall like silk caught in wind. It's light, mischievous, haunting, new. Apollo's frown twitches. Zeus raises an eyebrow. What is that? Hermes shrugs. Something I made. Music. You like? You're witnessing the invention of the lyre, an actual instrument with real-world roots. The myth says Hermes used a tortoise shell, stretched with cow gut strings, yes, from those cows, and attached wooden arms. Historians believe the story mirrors how ancient Mediterranean cultures developed early string instruments, melding animal parts and wood into something hauntingly human. Apollo steps closer. Let me try. Hermes hesitates, then slowly hands it over. Apollo plucks a note, then another. Something flickers in his eyes, not rage, not pride, something in between. Recognition. Music. The kind that's his, but also not. He lowers the lyre. You're still in trouble, he mutters. Hermes grins. But I'm also a genius. And weirdly, you think Apollo kind of agrees. You're still perched awkwardly behind that marble pillar, unsure if you're watching a trial, a sibling squabble, or the soft launch of an intergalactic boy band. Apollo turns the lyre over in his hands. It's lightweight, elegant, an odd little Frankenstein of a thing, part tortoise, part cow, all mischief. He plucks a few more strings. They resonate differently when he plays, more structured, more divine. The notes settle like dust in the corners of the hall. Hermes, lounging now with his chin in his palms, watches like a proud dad at a school talent show. I could make another, he says, but I'd need another tortoise. Zeus waves that comment away before someone actually starts harvesting reptiles. Apollo is trying not to admit that he loves it, but you can tell. It's the way he turns slightly away, shielding his expression from everyone, including you. There's a battle going on in his golden brain. On one hand, cattle theft. On the other, this sound. This new thing. This possibility. Then comes the bargaining. Apollo wants his cattle. Hermes wants some credit. You want a blanket and maybe a divine snack cart. But instead, Zeus calls for a compromise. "Return the cows," Zeus says, "and teach your brother how to make that thing sing." Hermes frowns. "But I did make it sing." "More formally," Zeus clarifies, with the same tone a tired parent uses when refereeing who gets the last cookie. And so it begins. Apollo agrees, grudgingly, to take the lyre in exchange for dropping the charges. Hermes agrees enthusiastically to give back the cattle. You follow them out of the hall, trying to stay quiet as the brothers descend from Olympus. Apollo looking like he's just lost a bet. Hermes skipping despite the fact he's still technically in baby form. As they arrive back on Earth, Apollo inspects the herd, safe, well-fed, and oddly more organized than before. Hermes has grouped them by color and personality type. One particularly dramatic cow has been renamed the Oracle. "You know," Hermes says, tossing a stick for absolutely no reason, "I think I'd be good at managing herds. Or markets. Or both." He's not wrong. This is the moment scholars point to as Hermes' turning point. Not just a thief anymore, but the budding god of commerce, negotiation, and cheeky improvisation. Historians still argue whether the myth reflects early societal shifts toward barter economies or just a convenient way to give Hermes a job title. You sidestep a particularly enthusiastic cow and find yourself walking beside Apollo. He's humming under his breath. The lyres slung across his back. Apollo gives a glowing speech about the power of music, the order of sound, the majesty of divine creation. He names the lyre a sacred tool of the arts, completely ignoring the fact that it was invented by a teething infant with grass stains on his knees. Hermes doesn't mind. He's already moved on to something new. You spot him fiddling with vines and two sticks, trying to make fire. Or maybe a slingshot. Or both. He hums as he works, fully absorbed, casually inventing things as if the world were made of spare parts and string. Meanwhile, the gods take notice. Apollo has calmed down, somewhat. His music, now lyre-accompanied, floats down through temples and forests. Mortal poets weep. Birds sing in harmonies they didn't know they had. And Hermes? He becomes useful. Messengers need speed. Traders need charm. Thieves need patronage. And who better to guide them than the kid who stole Apollo's cows on day one? The cows themselves, remember them? Return to their original pasture. They don't seem particularly traumatized. In fact, they look oddly proud, as if being central to the weirdest godly prank ever has granted them some kind of celebrity status. One cow, chewing thoughtfully, stares at you for an uncomfortably long time. You walk away slowly. By nightfall, the tale has become legend, not because of the theft, really, but because of the weird, wobbly alliance that grew from it. The gods, famously dramatic, have stories about war, vengeance, love, and doom. But this is something softer, stranger, almost wholesome, sort of. There's still the issue of Hermes technically committing fraud, kidnapping, and possibly endangering sacred livestock. But hey, Olympus is flexible when you've got good PR. You sit under the stars, the herd settled behind you, the gentle pluck of a lyre drifting down from the clouds. Apollo's playing, probably composing a ballad about personal growth and minor sibling trauma. Hermes sneaks up beside you, offers you a fig, and grins. You think he'll thank me in the lyrics? You raise an eyebrow. Yeah, Hermes nods. Me neither. You wake with a start, or maybe you never quite fell asleep, under a fig tree, where Apollo's cows have nestled like giant, moody marshmallows. It's quiet now. The gods have retreated. The tension has diffused. And somewhere far above, Apollo is probably tuning his new lyre and pretending he invented it. But you're not done. Because Apollo has questions. Lots of them. And unlike some other Olympians who hurl thunderbolts at anything confusing, Apollo likes answers. Cold, hard, symmetrical truth. And right now the truth has muddy hoofprints and smells vaguely of trickery. So you follow him. The god of light is walking through the hills, golden robe still impossibly clean despite the terrain. He doesn't say much, just mutters to himself in hexameter and occasionally sighs at plants that grow too crooked. He's following something, or trying to. The trail Hermes left is long gone, of course, wiped clean by clever feet and leafy sandals. But Apollo is a god. He doesn't need a trail, he needs a witness. First stop, the river Alpheus. Now, Alpheus is no ordinary stream. In myth, rivers have personalities, and this one is notoriously chatty, unless it doesn't feel like talking. Apollo stands at the bank and calls out in formal, divine register. "River Alpheus, did you see anyone pass with my cattle?" The water gurgles. Bubbles rise. A small fish does a dramatic flop. Then, silence. You squint. Nothing. Not even a passive-aggressive ripple. Apollo frowns. He hates being ignored. "I know you saw something," he says again, a little louder. Alpheus finally replies, with a burble that translates to something like, "Look, I see a lot of things, can't be expected to remember every cow thief that wanders by, busy being a river, you know." Apollo seethes. You sidestep behind a tree, just in case solar rage becomes a weather event. Still, he persists. Next stop, a grove of oaks, ancient and creaky with gossip. They're older than most gods and notoriously nosy. Apollo asks them the same question. The trees rustle non-committally, shedding a few leaves like shrugging shoulders. "Could have been a storm," one mutters. "Or a goat, hard to say, we don't keep notes." This, you realize, is a divine cover-up. Hermes has charmed the very landscape into playing dumb, and it's working. Even the sun, Apollo's own realm, doesn't offer clarity. He peers into the past with divine sight, but the images blur, distorted like heat waves over sand. That's how good Hermes is. He's not just... Eventually, Apollo ends up at a shepherd's hut. A mortal, half asleep, waves at him like he's just another traveler. Apollo asks again. The shepherd blinks. "Cows? I did hear something mooing last night, but that could have been my wife. She snores." You suppress a snort. Apollo thanks him, barely, and storms out. By now it's clear. The landscape is in on it. Mountains shrug, streams lie, birds pretend to be asleep. Even the wind, usually loyal to Apollo, whistles a misdirecting tune. You walk beside him as he finally mutters, "It's as if the world itself is mocking me." It is. Because here's the thing. Apollo stands for order, reason, and clear answers. But Hermes? Hermes thrives in ambiguity. He is the chaos between Apollo's sunbeams. And this is the first time Apollo realizes that not all problems can be solved with light. Back at the cave, yes, we're going back. Hermes is practicing facial expressions in a mirror of polished obsidian. You arrive just as he tries out, confused, then offended, then too cute to prosecute. Apollo enters. The temperature rises 3 degrees. Hermes looks up and says, without irony, "Oh hey, back so soon?" Apollo's hands twitch, just a little. "Where are my cows?" Still don't know what those are. You press yourself against the wall. This again. But this time Apollo doesn't threaten, doesn't shout. He just stares, long and hard, the kind of stare that burns through half-truths and charm. Hermes finally drops the act. "Okay," he says, sitting up. "Let's say hypothetically I did move some cows, just to test the mobility of large quadrupeds." Apollo raises an eyebrow. "And maybe I left a few deceptive footprints, just as a conceptual art piece." Apollo crosses his arms. "And maybe I returned them cleaner than they were before, so really you should be thanking me." You wait for thunder, for fire, for divine smiting. Instead, Apollo sighs, deep, long, full of every exasperated older sibling in the universe. "You are exhausting." Hermes beams. Apollo turns to go, but pauses at the entrance. "By the way," he says, "your disguise spell on the river was clever, but you forgot the frogs. They croaked your name all night." Hermes blinks. "Betrayed by amphibians. Noted." And just like that, the chase is over. Not because Apollo caught the thief, but because he saw the value in what was created along the way. A new sound, a new relationship, a new god who could be useful, maybe. You trail after Apollo as you return to Mount Silene one more time, and this time you know what to expect. Soft moss underfoot, the smell of pine sap in the air, and a smug baby god pretending to nap after one of the most elaborate crimes in divine history. Except Hermes isn't sleeping. He's prepping. He hears you approach and flashes a grin from beneath a heap of sheepskins. His hands are busy fiddling with bits of dried grass and twine. "What?" he says casually. "You think I don't have a follow-up act?" You should know by now. Hermes never stops. Apollo arrives next. Not with fury, not even with sarcasm this time, but with intent. He's decided to take Zeus's directive seriously and see this thing through, which means dragging a freshly disobedient god baby to the high halls of Olympus to explain himself. Not for punishment anymore, for presentation. Hermes climbs into Apollo's arms without complaint, though not without commentary. "You know," he says, "you could just let me walk. I do fine on my own." "You're still the size of a fig," Apollo says. "Tall for my age?" Hermes replies. They rise again toward the clouds, and you float along invisibly, half observer, half dream. Olympus looms ahead, as dazzling and ridiculous as ever. Pillars wider than your house, statues taller than your ego. Gods sipping ambrosia like it's sparkling water on a spa day. They land at the central courtyard. Apollo places Hermes gently on a pedestal that is absolutely not designed for babies. A few gods peek around columns. Dionysus leans out with a bunch of grapes and whispers, "What'd the kid do now?" "Apollo let him borrow some cows," Hermes calls out cheerfully. Apollo's jaw tightens. Zeus strolls in last, toga slightly askew, beard perfectly tousled like a weathered professor. "So, what now, sunshine?" Apollo gestures to Hermes, who's busy using vines to tie 3 beetles together into a chariot. He's returned the cattle. Mostly. He built a lyre. And now, he wants a job. Zeus raises an eyebrow. "Do we hire babies now?" Hermes looks up. "Hire me, and I'll stop doing things without permission." A fair point. And now comes a moment you wouldn't have believed if you hadn't seen it with your own metaphysical eyeballs.
Hermes delivers what might be the most convincing baby pitch of all time. He lists his talents: travel speed, unrivaled; communication skills, fluent in 3 languages, 2 bird dialects, and sarcasm; creativity, built the lyre and got away with stealing cows within 24 hours of birth; flexibility, literally invented backwards walking; PR charm, just look at that face. The gods are right there, on a warm marble floor where nectar has probably been spilled by demigods pretending to be subtle. Hermes is granted official status: messenger of the gods, patron of travelers, guardian of doorways and deals, and, unofficially, Olympic gold medalist in cow-based shenanigans. You'd think he'd throw a party. Maybe he will later. But for now, he yawns. A genuine one this time. Stealing cattle is exhausting. So is reinventing music, dodging divine accusations, and charming an entire pantheon. He crawls into a blanket nest beside one of Zeus's thrones and hums softly. A melody you recognize. The same one he played on the lyre. Soft, slightly uneven, but soothing in a way that makes your eyelids feel heavy. Historians still argue whether the myth of Hermes's first day was meant to explain his domains or simply to entertain. Some say it's a parable about intelligence over strength. Others suggest it's a metaphor for the chaotic beauty of creation, how even disorder can bring harmony. And some, frankly, just like the cow jokes. You watch the gods disperse. Apollo vanishes in a beam of light. Dionysus returns to his vines. Athena says nothing but smirks, which is somehow worse. Zeus reclines again with a small grunt of approval. Only Hermes remains awake. He stares at the stars beyond the mountaintop, blinking slowly, as if calculating new ideas. Then he glances at you. Yes, you. And he winks. "Stick around," he whispers. This was just the pilot episode. You lie back on the marble, cool and smooth beneath you. Somewhere below, the cows moo sleepily in their pen. The lyre's faint notes echo once more through the clouds. Everything feels oddly peaceful. For now, you wake, or maybe drift deeper into another slice of divine reality. Olympus is quiet now, the cows are accounted for, and Hermes is, for the moment, not inventing anything. He's lying on his back beneath a laurel tree, chewing a blade of grass like a small, mythological delinquent. But this, it turns out, is just the intermission of his divine debut, because Apollo isn't done processing what just happened. He's still stewing, not in rage anymore, but in reflection, and for a god who thrives on clarity, this whole cow-herding debacle is now oddly inspirational. You trail Apollo as he walks the halls of Olympus, lyre in hand, playing fragments of new songs. They're clumsy at first. He's a virtuoso, yes, but this instrument is still foreign in his hands, like a cat trying to work a typewriter. Still, the sound grows richer, fuller, more structured with each attempt. Soon, you realize, Apollo's not just playing, he's composing. This becomes a defining moment for him, the beginning of his association with structured music, poetry, and the muses. Hermes may have built the lyre, but Apollo is about to turn it into the soul of civilization. Historians note that from this point forward, Apollo becomes the god of music and poetry, not just light and logic, and scholars still debate whether this origin story was retrofitted to explain his musical supremacy, or if it reflects a real cultural shift in how Greeks conceptualized art and order. You float beside him as he begins to teach the muses,
9 divine figures who've been waiting centuries for an upgrade from wind flutes and rhythm stones. He names chords, invents scales, and begins cataloging melodies like a divine librarian with a head cold and a perfectionism problem. But back down on Earth, Hermes is also busy. He's standing in a meadow surrounded by his former victims, yes, the cows, who now follow him around like mildly concerned groupies. He's holding a stick, pointing at a rock, and mumbling something about logistics, because apparently stealing cows once wasn't enough. He's planning a system. He starts marking the cows, nothing harmful, just streaks of clay across their flanks. He separates them by grazing needs, temperament, even snore volume. He draws crude diagrams in the dirt, paths, storage areas, trade routes. At one point, he invents a tiny abacus out of pebbles and beetle shells. And that's when it hits you. Hermes isn't done being a thief. He's becoming a merchant. There's a term for this moment in classical studies, the mythic pivot. It's when a character stops representing raw chaos and starts symbolizing something socially useful. Hermes doesn't lose his mischief. He just channels it into systems, delivery systems, exchange systems.
This, scholars say, is the seed of his later domains: commerce, trade, profit margins, and yes, theft. But theft with infrastructure. Hermes is about to become the god of logistics, long before UPS was a thing. Back on Olympus, the gods start noticing. Athena, goddess of wisdom, peeks at Apollo's lyre compositions and nods silently. She won't admit it, but she's impressed. Dionysus requests background music for his wine tastings. Artemis insists on a solo for her moonlit hunting parties. Even Hestia, who normally minds her own fire, hums along when she thinks no one's listening. Apollo accepts the praise with his usual chill but glowing demeanor. "It's nothing," he says. "Just a little something I've been working on." Hermes hears about it, of course, and instead of being offended, he's delighted. He's now free to pivot again. With Apollo owning the music god title, Hermes decides to expand his resume. He begins designing new tools, not instruments this time, but devices. Fire-starting kits, multi-purpose sandals, a pouch that no one can see inside, but is always full of something. You watch him fashion one using batwing scraps, goat hide, and something suspiciously glittery. He calls it inventory. You're watching invention in real time. Innovation. Not for art's sake, but for convenience. Hermes isn't building a temple. He's building the future of errands. Down in a village, a potter wakes up to find a note, written on a fig leaf, and a pouch of coins in exchange for 3 jugs of oil. The handwriting is shaky but stylish. Hermes' work. The potter shrugs, scratches his head, and mutters, "I guess we do delivery now?" And just like that, commerce spreads. Hermes begins visiting mortals, not as a thief this time, but as a very persuasive middleman. He offers them tools, tips, untraceable storage solutions. "Fastest delivery under 5 Olympian minutes," he says, winking. And it works. You hear people talking in markets, in temples, even in taverns. That little god with the sandals showed up again, sold me a talking stick. Might have been a regular stick, but he said it was magical. Hermes has made himself indispensable, which is honestly the trickiest form of power there is. By sunset, you find yourself back on Olympus, watching him doodle a flowchart with olive paste on a marble step. He pauses, looks up, and says to no one in particular, "Next, I think I'll try aviation." You don't ask.
You're starting to suspect that sleep is impossible in Hermes' orbit. Every time you close your eyes, he's invented a new object, rewritten a tradition, or redefined a god's job description. Tonight, he's bartering. Yes, bartering. With Apollo, again, and you can feel the tension in the air. Not the explosive dramatic kind from before, but the slow burning kind that smells faintly of roasted ego and divine pride. Apollo sits on a low marble bench, plucking a few serene notes from the lyre Hermes gave him. His fingers are expert now, sliding across the strings with the kind of effortless grace that says, "I've absolutely claimed this instrument as my own." Hermes watches, arms crossed, chewing a fig stem. "Sounds good," he says. "Still playing my lyre, though." Apollo doesn't even flinch. "The lyre I perfected, you mean?" Hermes nods slowly. "Mm-hmm. Tell you what, you keep that one. I'll make something better." Apollo side-eyes him. "You're bluffing." "You're glowing," Hermes replies. "Does that mean you're nervous?" Apollo plucks a dissonant note, definitely on purpose. This, you realize, is the divine version of two brothers trading baseball cards, and pretending neither of them cares. Hermes reaches into his satchel, which now appears to contain everything, including a loaf of barley bread, a stylus, and what looks suspiciously like a folded-up kite, and pulls out a handful of strings and polished bone. "I'll make you a new instrument," he says, "one with deeper resonance. Call it the barbiton." Apollo raises an eyebrow. "You just made a lyre yesterday." "I'm on a roll." And then it begins. Not just the crafting. Hermes always makes crafting look like child's play. But the bargaining. Because Hermes doesn't just want Apollo's forgiveness anymore. He wants influence, access, something akin to, well, power, but sneakier. "If I give you this new instrument," he says, carefully winding the gut strings, "I want something in return." Apollo sighs. "What now?" Hermes grins. "A job title." Apollo pauses. "You already have one." "Not an official one," Hermes replies, adjusting the bridge on his new creation. "I want to be known as the god of trade, of boundaries, of clever thinking." Apollo considers this, slowly, deliberately. Then he says, "You're already acting like it." Hermes hands him the new instrument, still warm from the sun, and smiles. "Then make it official." And just like that, another trade is sealed. Not with thunder, not back on Earth, the effects ripple. A merchant in Corinth suddenly dreams of a winged figure whispering advice on storage and pricing. A shepherd in Thessaly wakes with a vision of a bag that never runs out of breadcrumbs. A priest in Delphi reports seeing Apollo smile. Smile as he plays something not written centuries ago. The gods are trading. And their trades are reshaping the cosmos. You follow Hermes back to his cave. He's bouncing on the balls of his feet, practically vibrating with energy. "It's not just about instruments," he mutters. "It's about exchange. The whole universe runs on it." He's scribbling diagrams again. This time it's not cowherding routes or product mock-ups. It's relationships. Lines and loops between gods and mortal, temples and cities, offers and outcomes. He's tracking trust, in a way only a trickster could. "See," he tells you, not even looking up. "A cow's just a cow until you put it in the right story." You blink. That might actually be profound. Hermes suddenly perks up. You want to see something wild? You hesitate. But curiosity is stronger than sleep. He leads you to a field just beyond the cave. There, under the stars, are more inventions. A set of wind chimes tuned to echo prayers back at different pitches. A carved walking stick that grows warm when you face east. And a pouch of wind coins, pebbles that whistle when tossed through the air. None of it makes perfect sense, but all of it feels like it could. He hands you a wind coin. Try it, he says. You toss it into the breeze. It lets out a soft, rising whistle that somehow harmonizes with the wind itself. You look back at Hermes. He's not even watching you anymore. He's moved on to shaping a new kind of sandal. One that might let you hover a few inches above the ground. Or walk backward without looking. He doesn't explain. He doesn't need to. Because the truth is, he's not really inventing things. He's inventing stories. Every object he creates is an excuse for interaction, for travel, for mischief, for connection. And that's the real trade he made with Apollo. Not the lyre, or the cattle, or the instruments, but meaning. You spent enough time among the gods now to know that diplomacy usually involves lightning, wine, or shouting. But this time, it's different. This time, Zeus gets involved. And not as a wrathful storm hurling thunderbolts from his celestial armchair, but as, well, a very tired father figure. You find him reclined on a divinely oversized couch made of clouds and smugness. His beard is neatly combed, his sandals polished like a bureaucrat's soul. When Hermes and Apollo approach him, one with a lyre slung over his shoulder, the other with winged sandals and a sly grin, Zeus doesn't look surprised. He looks like a man who knew this meeting was inevitable, and deliberately postponed it with a long lunch. Apollo starts, his tone clipped but respectful. Father, Hermes has returned the cattle. He has also made amends. Zeus raises an eyebrow without sitting up. You mean the lyre? Apollo sighs. Yes, the lyre. Hermes steps forward with a dramatic cough. And I'd like my contributions acknowledged. Zeus stares. There is a long silence. Then, you're a literal infant. I'm an effective infant. Zeus pinches the bridge of his nose in that universal gesture of exasperated dads everywhere. So, let me get this straight, he says. You, Hermes, stole your brother's sacred cattle on the day of your birth. Hermes grins. Correct. You then reversed the hoofprints, disguised your scent, lied convincingly, invented music, negotiated peace with Apollo, created a system of divine bartering, and launched 3 startup cults in Boeotia before lunch. Hermes bows. Also correct. Zeus glances at Apollo. And you? Apollo shrugs. I yelled at a tree. The tree ignored me. You stifle a laugh. Zeus finally sits up. The sky rumbles a little, just to remind everyone who signs the cosmic paychecks. Fine. Hermes, you've proven yourself useful, surprisingly, annoyingly. Hermes beams. But, Zeus adds, holding up one massive finger, usefulness doesn't excuse disruption. The heavens are a delicate balance. We can't just have gods galloping off with livestock and inventing whole art forms without a system in place. Hermes tilts his head. So, make me part of the system. And somehow the room gets quieter, even the clouds still. Zeus narrows his eyes. What exactly are you asking? Hermes doesn't hesitate. I want formal authority over travel,
commerce.
Hermes is given official divine jurisdiction over a swath of mortal and godly matters, everything that slips through the cracks of rigidity. Travel, trade, words, transitions, theft, all the little in-between things that keep the world humming without ever fully being seen. You're witnessing the birth of the messenger of the gods, the one who will ferry souls to the underworld, whisper omens into sleeping ears, guide lost travelers, and appear precisely when not expected. Zeus adds one final decree. You'll need a staff, something symbolic. Hermes pauses, then lights up. Can I have snakes? Apollo groans. Why snakes? They're symbolic, Hermes says. Transformation, motion, negotiation, plus they coil nicely. Zeus allows it, and thus is born the caduceus, a winged staff with two intertwining serpents, which historians still confuse with the rod of Asclepius, to the eternal frustration of classicists everywhere. Wings? Zeus asks, halfway amused. Hermes is already sketching the idea in the air. On the staff, on the sandals, on everything. It's about speed, grace, style. You are the most exhausting god I've ever met, Zeus mutters. Flattered, Hermes replies. You expect some grand ceremony, maybe music, celestial spotlights, a scroll of divine HR paperwork, but Zeus simply waves his hand and says, go do your job, and try not to break the cosmos before dinner. With that, the gods disperse. Apollo lingers. He watches Hermes twirl the caduceus like a baton and says, you'll mess this up, you know. Hermes stops. Maybe, but I'll do it faster than anyone else. Apollo gives a slow nod, the kind that says, I respect you, but I will never admit it out loud. Then he leaves. Hermes turns to you. Well, he says, adjusting his now winged sandals, I've got divine business cards to design and about 14 temples to crash. Coming? You follow. Because how could you not? By now, following Hermes is second nature, like trailing behind a gust of wind that sometimes stops to sell you a better pair of shoes. Today, though, is quieter. There are no cows to herd, no gods to outwit, just a sky painted in soft blues and a new, faintly ridiculous sense of brotherly peace. You wouldn't have believed it 2 days ago, but Apollo and Hermes are walking together, yes, together, across the golden slopes of Olympus, exchanging stories, instrument tips, and occasional passive-aggressive compliments. I admit, Apollo says, brushing a hand over his lyre, you're good with design. Hermes grins. And you've stopped making it sound like a harp with performance anxiety. That's about as affectionate as things get up here. They stop by a pool fringed with silver-leafed trees. Apollo sits, tuning his lyre. Hermes plops beside him, pulling out a bundle of herbs and carving what looks suspiciously like a travel flute from a fennel stalk. Neither says much, but the silence is easy. For once. It's strange seeing them like this, sun and shadow, structure and improvisation. But that's what makes it work. Opposites, not enemies. A bird flits down from a branch chirping. Apollo tilts his head, listens, then plays the notes back on the lyre. Hermes hums a harmony, slightly off-key, on purpose. You realize you're hearing the first duet of the gods, and it's surprisingly wholesome. Somewhere in the distance, a thunderclap rolls. Not a threat, just Zeus sneezing. Hermes takes the moment to lean back and ask, you ever wonder what it's all for? Music, herding, messages, titles? Apollo doesn't answer immediately. Then he says, "For order." Hermes nods. "And disruption." Apollo gives him a look. "You're proud of that?" "Only a little," he grins. This rare camaraderie isn't just a personal win. It's a mythological milestone. It marks the beginning of their divine alliance. In later myths, they'll work together. Apollo, with his foresight and truth. Hermes, with his swiftness and subversion. They become a strange sort of team, helping heroes, delivering prophecies, guiding the dead, and, when no one's looking, playing music under moonlight, like a pair of bored demigods in a bard club. Historians note this brotherhood as unusual in Greek mythology. Sibling rivalries are usually the rule. Athena versus
Apollo adds. Her pitch was a little sharp on the second verse. Hermes smirks. Still thinking like a god. Always, Apollo says. Then, without ceremony, Hermes slips a small pouch under the merchant's table, filled with perfectly balanced stones. Makeshift weights, the kind that make trading fairer. The merchant never sees who did it. As they leave, Apollo turns to Hermes and says, "You didn't steal anything today." Hermes squints at the horizon. Didn't need to. And that might be the biggest shift of all, not a divine title or fancy staff, but the subtle transition from thief to guardian. He's still chaotic, still fast-talking, still 2 steps ahead of logic, but now there's a purpose behind it. You walk behind them as the sun dips low. Shadows stretch. Cows moo softly in a nearby pasture. Yes, the cows again. They're everywhere now, like a running gag with hooves. Apollo hums a new tune, one you haven't heard before. Something gentler, laced with mischief. Hermes whistles it back, perfectly offbeat. And for a moment, the world feels aligned. Not because everything makes sense, but because the two forces at its heart, order and trickery, have decided just this once to walk side by side. You find yourself back on Earth, in a valley so wide it feels like a sigh. The cows are grazing again, no drama this time, just slow munching, occasional tail flicks, and that one cow who still chews like she's plotting something. Hermes is there too, sitting on a rock, sketching something in the dirt with a twig. "I'm starting a business," he says without looking up. You glance around. Nothing here looks like a business, just rocks, grass, and cows trying to outstare each other. "Not like that," Hermes adds. "Not a stall, not a booth. Bigger. Trade routes, exchange hubs, a divine courier service with style." You blink. "You're inventing FedEx?" "I'm inventing civilization," he corrects, brushing off his hands. "With branding." Hermes is shifting again, no longer just a mischievous godlet, but the official Olympian responsible for communication, transit, and anything involving a transaction that might involve a sly wink and a last-minute discount. And somehow, it all started with cows. He stands, strides over to a flat boulder, and begins carving symbols into it. Curved lines, abstract shapes, dots and bars. It's not just doodling. It's script. Hermes is inventing a written shorthand for keeping track of trade, proto-accounts, contracts, and tallies. Historians still marvel at how myth mirrors reality here. The god who stole cows evolves into the god who facilitates commerce, record-keeping, and even language itself. Some argue this aspect of Hermes reflects the ancient world's growing need for structure in economies and travel. Others suggest it's just a brilliant joke. Make the liar write everything down. Later, Hermes stands in front of a group of confused but curious mortals. Farmers, potters, traders. He waves his caduceus and says, "What if there were rules? What if I helped you trade not just stuff, but stories about stuff?" You'd expect resistance, but people are interested. Because Hermes doesn't preach. He negotiates. He explains things like supply, value, and efficiency using metaphors involving goats, and maybe one involving olive oil wrestling, which you choose not to ask about. He gives them tools, weighted stones, tally marks, even symbols for months and lunar cycles. A calendar, he says. Very marketable. You realize you're watching myth become infrastructure. Hermes starts to train messengers, mortals for now, but chosen carefully. He instructs them on routes, signs, and sacred signals. His first decree: never lose a message. And if you're going to be late, make sure you have a better story than the original message. It works. Cities slowly begin carving out dedicated roads, paths worn smoother, not by armies, but by sandals. Messages travel faster. Trade becomes reliable. The world shrinks, in a good way. Back on Olympus, Zeus watches all. Apollo, nearby, replies, "That's almost worse." Hermes, of course, overhears. "You're welcome," he says, handing Apollo a scroll tied in golden twine. "Your fan mail." Apollo opens it. Inside is a single note. "Your lyre still sounds like you're trying too hard." You expect a lightning bolt. Instead, Apollo laughs, and shakes his head. He's absolutely impossible. But that's the point. Hermes is building a reputation now, not just as a trickster, but as someone who gets things done. He's the god you pray to when you need your ship to arrive intact, your trade to be fair, your message to reach the right ears, and maybe also when you need to get away with something a little sneaky. And the cows? They're just symbols now. Their hooves stamped the first divine prank, but their legacy is bigger. They represent value, mobility, and strangely, harmony. Even the clumsiest cow in the herd has a place now, a grazing schedule, a name, and possibly a fan club. You lie in the grass and listen to the breeze whisper through the valley. Somewhere in the distance, a merchant is learning how to haggle without being punched. A child is scratching symbols onto pottery for the first time. A shepherd ties 2 lengths of twine together using Hermes's new knot design. And overhead, winged sandals cut quietly through the clouds. A system is in place. A god is at work. And somehow, in the middle of it all, there's still room for laughter. It's late again. Whatever late means on Olympus, where the sun technically works for the family. And you're following a melody. Not Apollo's this time. Something cruder, rawer, less divine precision, more enthusiastic strumming. It comes from a grove, just beyond the edge of the main halls, where a tortoise shell rests against a rock, its strings gleaming in the moonlight. Hermes is playing the original lyre. Yes, the same one that started all this. The one built from a bored baby's imagination and whatever unfortunate tortoise happened to be nearby. He hasn't discarded it. He treasures it. And now he's teaching someone else to play. A young mortal sits across from him, fingers stiff with hesitation. Hermes guides them gently, repeating the melody, cracking a joke every time the mortal plucks the wrong string. There's laughter, real, relaxed, un-Olympian laughter. You realize something. This lyre isn't just a divine relic, it's a gift. And it has a future. Because while Apollo will go on to perfect the instrument, standardize its tuning, elevate it in temples and concerts, Hermes gave it to the people first. He taught it in the dirt, by torchlight, between cow schedules and bartering lessons. His version is messy, a little offbeat, but filled with heart. Historians often overlook this part. They talk about the grandeur of Apollo's concerts, the shrine music in Delphi, the official hymns, but they forget. Hermes made the lyre portable, playable, shareable. There's a fringe theory, in fact, that early folk traditions in Greece, those rustic village songs sung around cooking fires,
owe more to Hermes than to any Olympian. Scholars still argue whether these songs filtered upward into formal culture or survived beside it in a parallel rhythm of common life. Back in the grove, Hermes finishes a tune and hands over the lyre. The mortal blinks, unsure. "Keep it," Hermes says. "Make your own songs, even if they're bad, especially if they're bad." You can almost hear Apollo groan in the distance. But Hermes doesn't care. His music isn't about perfection. It's about movement, about sound that travels, that sneaks into places no temple choir would dare to go, across borders, into back alleys, beneath floorboards, and through windows on a breeze. He starts carving again, not just instruments this time, but instructions. He scratches diagrams on clay tablets, how to stretch strings, how to tune by moonlight, which woods resonate best under different skies. He hides these instructions where mortals can find them centuries later, and some do. Meanwhile, Apollo elevates the lyre into celestial canon. He invents competitions, teaches the muses to compose in complex meters, performs in sweeping halls with acoustics designed by Poseidon's best interns. The cowherd sings his version while fixing a fence. A trader whistles it from behind her cart. Children strum the melody on makeshift lyres built from driftwood and vine. This dual legacy is one of the most fascinating things in Greek mythology. A single invention split into two lives. Apollo's lyre stands for refinement, Hermes's for rebellion. Both coexist. Neither cancels the other. Kind of like the gods themselves. You lie under a fig tree as Hermes strums absent-mindedly. He doesn't look proud exactly, just satisfied, like someone who knows he started something bigger than he can control. "Funny thing about music," he says suddenly, not even turning to you. "You can't own it. You can only pass it on." He pauses, then adds, "Even Apollo knows that. He just pretends not to." A breeze picks up, soft and warm. You hear distant voices, mortals down below singing. Not perfectly, not together, but singing. Hermes grins. "Sounds like the lyre's doing fine without us." And you realize it is. It has moved from Olympus to earth, from divine fingers to clumsy mortal hands, and still it sings. You find Hermes one morning, not inventing, not scheming, not even moving, just sitting, perched on a rocky outcrop above a cloud-smeared ravine. He watches the sunrise in quiet disbelief. Because today, he's got feelings. Sort of. Behind him, Apollo arrives with a shimmer of golden light and the careful gait of someone who's decided to try being mature for once. He sits beside Hermes without a word. There's no argument this time, no musical insults, just silence. Almost friendship. "Do you miss them?" Hermes asks, eyes still on the horizon. "Who?" Apollo says. "The cows." Apollo groans. "I'm serious," Hermes says, smiling faintly. "They made us talk to each other." Apollo doesn't answer. He just tilts his head, visibly weighing whether admitting affection for livestock would permanently damage his reputation. "You ever think we maybe needed that?" Hermes continues. "The ridiculousness, the mess, the way we almost lit Olympus on fire over a dairy dispute." Apollo lets out a sigh that could have been a chuckle if you tilted your head just right. "You're insufferable." "And you're melodramatic," Hermes replies. "But now we're both better at what we do." And it's true. Apollo, since their odd reconciliation, has begun sharing his music more often, more freely. Where once he only performed in the vaulted ceilings of temples and under the strict cadence of hymn, now you catch him playing for children in gardens. You hear him humming while tending his sacred laurel groves. He's even taken to teaching the occasional mortal, not just in theory but in play. Hermes, in turn, has learned a strange new skill: restraint. Not too much, of course. He still swaps temple offerings if they look boring. He still writes fake messages to flirt with naiads. But now he considers his actions first. Mostly. Occasionally. Sometimes. He's growing. You've witnessed the transformation of both gods, each shaped by the other. Apollo, the symbol of precision and clarity, now softened by playfulness. Hermes, born of chaos, now guided by purpose. Their rivalry is now a rhythm, call and response, mischief and melody, and sometimes it even works. Take the temple in Corinth, for example. Apollo blesses it with structured chants, geometric murals, a perfectly symmetrical echo. Then Hermes wanders in the next day and adds a little corner stall where pilgrims can trade tokens for storytelling performances. Neither god admits the other improved it, but both return often. There's a mural being painted now, a new myth in the making. One side shows Apollo, radiant and poised, with the lyre at his side. The other, Hermes, winged and wide-eyed, holding his caduceus, and historians still interpret this shared myth arc in different ways. Some say it reflects a real human shift, how ancient societies balance the need for structure, Apollo, with the inevitability of disruption, Hermes. Others argue it's just a very long joke that got out of hand. But the story endures, because it reflects something true. Everyone, at some point, is a little Apollo, trying to control the narrative, shine with grace, and keep everything in order. And everyone, eventually, is a little Hermes, messing up, winging it, and creating something beautiful by accident. As the sun climbs higher, Apollo stands. "I've got a ceremony," he says, brushing non-existent dust from his robes. "Bring me back something boring," Hermes replies, "so I can improve it." "You'd ruin it." "I'd optimize it." Apollo gives him a long look. Then, surprising even himself, he smiles. "Thanks, you know." Hermes blinks. "For what?" "For everything. Even the part where I nearly smote you." "Especially that part," Hermes says with a wink. As Apollo walks off, Hermes leans back on the rock. He pulls a rolled-up scroll from his pouch. A list of possible new inventions. Portable flame, pocket echo, self-updating travel map. He taps the scroll thoughtfully, then adds a new line at the bottom, how to share glory without throwing a cow. He laughs. You laugh. Even the ravine below seems to echo it, faintly but warmly. Because while gods may be immortal, even they sometimes need time to mature. You find Hermes again, this time in what could only be described as a divine junk drawer. It's a cluttered little courtyard on the far edge of Olympus, hidden behind a half-finished pillar and a potted olive tree that's been repurposed as a hat stand. This is Hermes's invention zone. It smells like beeswax, sandalwood, and mild danger. He's hunched over a slab of marble that's been scratched, burnt, painted, and stabbed in equal measure. Around him lie scattered prototypes, winged boots that flap on their own, too much, a scroll that reads itself aloud, in an annoying accent, and a talking scale that refuses to weigh things without compliments first. "Beta testing," Hermes mutters, not looking up. Terrible phase. Everything either explodes or insults you. You inch closer. He gestures to a stack of items like he's giving a tour of his own brain. "This one's a pouch that only opens if you say something clever. That one's a self-hiding coin. And this," he lifts a feather-light cube, "this is a portable echo." You raise an eyebrow. "Throw it," he urges. You do. It hits a tree, bounces once, and says in Hermes's voice, "Nice aim, mortal. You've got potential." It's absurd, and oddly charming. Because Hermes, now well into his role as Olympian fixer of the unfixable,
has taken to inventing things that serve no grand purpose but to delight, confuse, and occasionally solve problems no one else knew existed. Like a stylus that never runs out of ink, or a sandals cleaning charm, or a flute that only plays in the key of mischief. But there's something deeper happening here too. These aren't just trinkets. They're stories, disguised as objects. A coin that hides itself? That's a tale waiting to be told. A pouch that only opens when praised? That's practically a morality test. A staff with snakes that balance each other while spinning? Well, that's just Hermes being Hermes. He's not inventing for fame, not anymore. He's doing it because every object is a chance to create interaction, emotion, connection. Even, maybe especially, the ridiculous ones. And the other gods? They're starting to notice. Athena stops by occasionally, mutters about misapplied genius, and then borrows his quill design. Dionysus tries out the self-filling goblet. Big mistake. He ends up drunk for 3 days and insists the goblet talked back. Even Hades sends a polite request by a raven for one of those fireless lanterns I've been hearing about. But none of that compares to the day Hermes invents flying sandals that actually work. Not just in theory, not just in dreams, but airborne, speed of thought, ankle-powered. Hermes bows midair. That's the point. From this moment on, he is untouchable. Not just figuratively, but literally. His speed, his wit, his reach, these are no longer metaphors. Hermes can now cross realms in a blink. He becomes the bridge between mortal and divine, sacred and profane, fast and faster. Historians debate whether these sandals, the talaria, were symbolic of freedom, or whether they simply represented the Greek ideal of swiftness and cleverness. Either way, they become part of his core image. Along with the caduceus, they mark Hermes as the god who's never where you expect him to be, but always exactly where he needs to be. Back in his courtyard, he lands with a puff of wind and a very self-satisfied smirk. "Too fast?" he asks. You shake your head. "Didn't think so," he says, and tosses you one of the echo cubes for fun. And just like that, he's gone again, zipping off to deliver a dream, play a trick, negotiate a truce, or sneak a riddle into someone's breakfast. Because that's the thing about Hermes. You don't summon him. You realize, too late, that he's already been there, left something behind, and moved on. It's twilight now, and you're beginning to wonder if anything in Olympus ever truly winds down. The clouds are a little pinker, sure, the breeze is softer, but Hermes, still moving. You follow him as he dips through realms unseen, not grand visits, just a blur across thresholds, slipping messages into dreams, adjusting trade winds, tying and untying fate threads when no one's looking. He even sneaks into Hades' realm for exactly 3 minutes to drop off a bundle of narcissus flowers with no note. Because sometimes, Hermes says, even the dead deserve a little mystery. But tonight, something's different. You can feel it. The pace slows, not much, but enough. And for once, Hermes sits on the edge of a mortal temple roof, legs dangling off the side like he's not divine at all. He's watching people light oil lamps below. Families, merchants, scribes, some are praying, others are cooking dinner or cleaning wine jugs. All of them, whether they realize it or not, are connected by tiny invisible lines he's been weaving since the day he walked backward with stolen cattle. "I don't get temples," he says softly. "Everyone else does fire and glory. I do errands." He doesn't sound bitter, just bemused. And it's true. While Zeus gets lightning,
Athena gets battle hymns and Apollo gets 10 choirs and a sunset per day. Hermes gets footpaths, letters, markets, border stones, coin edges, things people touch and forget. He's everywhere, but never the center. And yet, maybe that's the point. Scholars still debate what Hermes really represents. Is he just the god of thieves and travelers, or does he symbolize the spaces between words, places, moments? One school of thought even suggests he's the mythological embodiment of liminality, the transitional undefined space where possibility thrives. Boundaries, thresholds, doorways, all the places humans fear and need. And it makes sense, because no one stands in more thresholds than Hermes. Not even Hecate. He leans back on the roof now, hands behind his head, sandals still faintly glowing from their last flight. You know, he says, it was never really about the cows. You tilt your head. He grins. It was about being noticed. And that, right there, might be the truest thing he's ever said. Because Hermes, youngest of the Olympians, smallest of the divine power players, slipperiest of all mythic minds, began his journey not with ambition, but with mischief, a nudge, a dare, a theft. And it worked. He made them look. From that moment, he shaped himself not through dominance or destruction, but by becoming necessary. He wove himself into the routine, into the road, into the joke. He just smiles. He's made peace with what he is, the middleman, the messenger, the negotiator, the god of liminal things. He doesn't want a throne. He wants motion. Tomorrow, he says, stretching, I think I'll try writing something that changes while you read it. You blink. Is that even possible? Hermes just shrugs. Who cares? I'll figure it out on the way. You believe him. Because if there's one thing Hermes has taught you, it's that reality bends for the curious, that rules exist to be bent, gently, cleverly, and that sometimes being in the middle means you can reach both ends at once. You look around. The moon is high. The cows are asleep. Somewhere Apollo is probably composing something too dramatic about torchlight. And here you are, on a rooftop, with the god who started a myth by walking backward. And now he's leading civilization forward. It's night now. The kind of night where even Olympus seems to exhale. The stars hang lazily in the sky, blinking like they're halfway through a dream. Down below, the mortal world softens. Hearths flicker low. Cities fall into hush. The only sound is the occasional cow snore, rhythmic and profoundly unbothered. You walk with Hermes one last time. He's quiet, not in a brooding way. Hermes doesn't really brood. It's more like he's letting the silence stretch, watching it ripple like water after a pebble toss. He's carrying nothing tonight. No scrolls, no tools, no plans. Just his caduceus, gently swinging at his side. Busy day, you ask. He chuckles. Just the usual. Sent 4 dreams, rerouted a merchant caravan, taught a fishmonger how to haggle, made a poet forget a bad rhyme, and tripped Ares for fun. You nod. Standard shift. You pass through a moonlit field where the grass glows faintly. Enchanted, maybe, or just kissed by starlight. Hermes stops to pick a sprig of thyme, twirls it between his fingers. I think people misunderstand what I do, he says. You tilt your head. They think I'm just the god of messages, he continues. But it's more than that. I'm the pause before the message, the breath before a journey, the moment when two sides decide to speak instead of fight. He smiles, soft this time. I'm not about direction. I'm about possibility. And you feel it, what he means. Because without Hermes, Apollo's melodies don't travel. Athena's strategies stay in scrolls. Dionysus's wine doesn't reach the feast. Without Hermes, Olympus becomes a still painting, beautiful, but lifeless. Hermes moves things. And in doing so, he makes the world move with him. He walks to the edge of a high cliff and looks out. Below, mortals dream. Some are dreaming of him, of winged sandals, of whispered guidance, of luck and laughter, and getting away with something that probably wasn't legal. I'm not a hero, he says. I'm a shortcut. You both laugh. He's not wrong. You sit beside him, watching clouds drift beneath your feet. Somewhere far off, you hear a baby cry, a cartwheel creak, a verse. You stay there a little longer, no need to rush. Even Hermes slows down sometimes, just to remind himself he can. Then he turns to you. Thanks for following the story, he says, even if it started with cow theft. You smile. Especially because it started with cow theft, you reply. And that's when he finally lies back, closes his eyes, and lets the night hold him. Now it's time to rest. Let the edges of Olympus fade from view, the bright marble softening into shadows, the gold turning to quiet gray. Let the last notes of Apollo's lyre melt into the background, like the echo of a dream you've already begun to forget. The world slows. You feel the night wrap gently around your shoulders, like Hermes's cloak when he's just returned from 1,000 errands. You hear the low murmur of distant rivers, the rustle of olive leaves. Even the cows, yes, them, settle in silence. No longer plot devices, but peaceful, drowsy beasts of mythic memory. Breathe in. Let go of the day's noise, of any sharp corners, of everything linear and logical. You're in a place now where time unspools softly, where the god of movement finally lets stillness settle in his bones, and where even winged sandals rest at the door. This is your moment in the middle, between dreams and waking, between action and story, between yesterday's mischief and tomorrow's message. There's no need to get up yet, no destination, just the comfort of drifting, of floating between thoughts, with nothing urgent, nothing unfinished, nothing to fix or figure out. Only the hum of a story that started with a stolen herd and ended in harmony. Only the memory of a smile too clever for its age. Only you and the quiet and a sky full of stars that won't ask for anything until morning. So rest. You've earned it. And maybe, just maybe, Hermes will visit your dreams tonight, just to say hello. End of script. Sweet dreams.